Hello, I'm Undead Waffle, and today I'm going to be reading for you some of OD&D's original rules, starting with Book 1. So this is Dungeons and Dragons: Rules for Fantastic Medieval War Games. So this is Book 1, Men and Magic, by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Foreword. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a little group known as the Castle and Crusade Society. Their fantasy rules were published, and to this writer's knowledge, brought about much of the current interest in fantasy wargaming. Their fantasy rules were published, and to this writer's knowledge, brought about much of the current interest in fantasy wargaming. For a time, the group knew and prospered, and Dave Arneson decided to begin a medieval fantasy campaign game for his active Twin Cities club. From the map of the land of the Great Kingdom and environs, the territory of the C&C Society, Dave located a nice bog wherein to nest the weird enclave of Blackmoor, a spot between the Great Kingdom and the fearsome Egg of Coot. From the chainmail fantasy rules, he drew ideas for a far more complex and exciting game, and thus began a campaign which still thrives as of this writing. In due course, the news reached my ears, and the result is what you have in your hands at this moment. While the C&C Society is no longer, its spirit lives on, and we believe that all wargamers who are interested in the medieval period, not just fantasy buffs, will enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons. Its possibilities go far beyond any previous offerings anywhere. While it is possible to play a single game, unrelated to any other game events, past or future, it is the campaign for which these rules are designed. It is relatively simple to set up a fantasy campaign, and better still, it will cost almost nothing. In fact, you'll not even need miniature figures, although their occasional employment is recommended for real spectacle when battles are fought. A quick glance at the equipment section of this booklet will reveal just how little is required. The most extensive requirement is time. The campaign referee will have to have sufficient time to meet the demands of his players. He'll have to devote a number of hours to laying out the maps of his dungeons and upper terrain before the affair begins. The third booklet of this set will be of great help in this respect, for a number of helpful suggestions regarding how to accomplish it all have been given in order to help you accomplish the task with a minimum of time and effort. There should be no want of players, for there is unquestionably a fascination in this fantasy game, evidenced even by those who could not by any stretch of the imagination be termed ardent wargamers. The longevity of existing campaigns, notably Blackmoor in the Twin Cities and Greyhawk in Lake Geneva, and the demand for these rules from people outside these campaigns point toward a fantastic future. Tactical Studies Rules believes that of all forms of wargaming, fantasy will soon become the major contender for first place. The section of this booklet entitled Scope will provide an idea of just how many possibilities are inherent in Dungeons and Dragons. These rules are strictly fantasy. Those wargamers who lack imagination, those who don't care for Burroughs' Martian adventures, where John Carter is groping through black pits, who feel no thrill upon reading Howard's Conan saga, who do not enjoy DeCamp and Pratt fantasies, or Fritz Lieber's Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser pitting their swords against evil sorceries, will not be likely to find Dungeons and Dragons to their taste. For those whose imaginations know no bounds will find that these rules are the answer to their prayers. With this last bit of advice, we invite you to read on and enjoy a world where the fantastic is fact and magic really works. E. Gary Gygax, Tactical Studies Rules Editor. November 1st, 1973, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Pretty interesting little foreword here. I think it's cool to see Gary Gygax's words about this stuff. Gets a little dramatic there at the end, but, I guess that's what you got to do to sell the game. Introduction. These rules are as complete as possible within the limitations imposed by the space of 3 booklets. That is, they cover the major aspects of fantasy campaigns, but still remain flexible. As with any other set of miniatures rules, they are guidelines to follow in designing your own fantastic medieval campaign. They provide the framework around which you will build a game of simplicity or tremendous complexity. Your time and imagination are about the only limiting factors, and the fact that you have purchased these rules tends to indicate that there is no lack of imagination. The fascination of the game will tend to make participants find more and more time. We advise, however, that a campaign be begun slowly, following the steps outlined herein, so as to avoid becoming too bogged down with unfamiliar details at first. That way, your campaign will build naturally, at the pace best suited to the referee and players, smoothing the way for all concerned. New details can be added and old laws altered so as to provide continually new and different situations. In addition, the players themselves will interact in such a way as to make the campaign variable and unique, and this is quite desirable. If you are a player purchasing the Dungeons & Dragons rules in order to improve your situation in an existing campaign, you'll find that there is a great advantage in knowing what is herein. If your referee has made changes in the rules and/or tables, simply note them in pencil, for who knows when some flux of the cosmos will make things shift once again. And keep the rules nearby as you play. A quick check of some rule or table may bring hidden treasure or save your game's life. Men and Magic, Book 1, details what characters may be played, potentials, limitations, and various magical spells. Monsters and Treasure, Book 2, describes the beasts and creatures which will be encountered, as well as the kind and amount of treasure they are likely to guard, including magical items. Finally, the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures, Book 3, tells how to set up and actually play the campaign. It is presented last in order to allow the reader to gain the perspective necessary. The understanding of the two preceding booklets. Read through the entire work in the order presented before you attempt to play. I think it's pretty interesting, this introduction here, how they talk about, these rules or guidelines, use your imagination, that kind of thing. I think these days in the OSR, we see kind of like a textual fidelity streak, where there's people who are like wanting to be perfectly following the rules as written. But there's a lot of other people who don't do that, and that's fine too. In fact, I think the best thing to do is to kind of make your own, what works for you as you go. But of course, you gotta start with the basics and learn how it works. And for a lot of people, best way to do that is to just play rules as written until you kind of find your groove. Scope. With the various equipage listed in the following section, Dungeons & Dragons will provide a basically complete, nearly endless campaign of all levels of fantastic medieval wargame play. Actually, the scope need not be restricted to the medieval. It can stretch from the prehistoric to the imagined future, but such expansion is recommended only at such a time as the possibilities in the medieval aspect have been thoroughly explored. The use of paper, pencil, and map boards are standard. Miniature figures can be added if the players have them available and so desire, but miniatures are not required, only aesthetically pleasing. Similarly, unit counters can be employed, with or without figures, although by themselves the bits of cardboard lack the eye appeal of the varied and brightly painted miniature figures. Age level, 12 years and up. Number of players, at least one referee, and from 4 to 50 players can be handled in any single situation. The referee to player ratio should be about 1 to 20 or thereabouts. Recommended equipment. Dungeons & Dragons, you have it. Dice. The following different kinds of dice. 1 pair of 4-sided dice, 1 pair of 8-sided dice, 4 to 20 pairs of 6-sided dice, 1 pair of 20-sided dice, 1 pair of 12-sided dice. Chainmail Miniature Rules, latest edition. 1 3-ring notebook, referee and each player. Graph paper, 6 lines per inch is best. Sheet protectors, heaviest possible. 3-ring line paper, drafting equipment and colored pencils, scratch paper and pencils, imagination, 1 patient referee, and players. So right here where it talks about the number of players, I think it's interesting that it says from 4 to 50 players can be handled. That is way, way more than any D&D campaign I've heard about these days. But I do know that campaigns were structured very differently back in these days, so it wouldn't be 50 players all sitting down at once. It would more be kind of a West Marches style campaign or something like that, where different people from that same pool are going to play each week in the same world, or however often you play. And then it says the referee to player ratio should be around 1 to 20. Yeah, I've never heard of that being a recommended number. I think most people are lucky these days to get a group of, a consistent group of like 3 or 4. But I guess if you had 20 people, you could schedule stuff a lot more easily and go on more adventures and whatnot. I think it's interesting here that they talk about having a 3-ring notebook for the referee and each player. I'm not sure what each player is going to have. in their notebooks besides their character sheet, which, according to these other pages, is only like a couple lines. It could fit on an index card pretty easily. Maybe a map, but I'm not sure. I mean, I guess notes, but I don't know that you really need a notebook for every player. Uh, at most, I guess I could see having a notebook for the party, and a notebook for the referee, but that's still going pretty crazy if you ask me. So drafting equipment and colored pencils. I'm assuming this is all for drawing maps and whatnot, illustrating scenes or something. Uh, Scratch paper and pencils. Yeah, it seems like this is all about mapping or something. Um, but that is interesting. Also, I think it is interesting that they call for pairs of dice. So a pair of D4s, a pair of D8s, 4 to 20 pairs of D6s. It's kind of weird way to, note that. You could just say 2 4-sided dice. But still, I mean, I guess 1 pair for the table, 4 to 20 pairs for the table. I'm not sure, but I guess that makes sense. These days, in my own games, I pretty much really only use the D6s and the D20s. I'll use D4s and D8s occasionally for certain kinds of weapons, damage dice, and I don't really ever use the D12 that much. But, it's there. Preparation for the campaign. The referee bears the entire burden here, but if care and thought are used, the reward will more than repay him. First, the referee must draw out a minimum of a half dozen maps of the levels of his underworld, people them with monsters of various horrid aspect, distribute treasures accordingly, and note the location of the latter 2 on keys, each corresponding to the appropriate level. This operation will be more fully described in the 3rd book of these rules. When this task is completed, the participants can then be allowed to make their first descent into the dungeons beneath the huge ruined pile, a vast castle built by generations of mad wizards and insane geniuses. Before they begin, players must decide what role they would play in the campaign, human or otherwise, fighter, cleric, or magic user. Thereafter, they will work upwards, if they survive, as they gain experience. First, however, it is necessary to describe fully the roles possible. Characters. There are 3 main classes of characters: fighting men, magic users, and clerics. Fighting men includes the characters of elves and dwarves and even halflings. Magic users includes only men and elves. Clerics are limited to men only. All non-human players are restricted in some aspects and gifted in others. This will be dealt with in the paragraphs pertaining to each non-human type. Fighting men. All magical weaponry is usable by fighters, and this in itself is a big advantage. In addition, they gain the advantage of more hit dice, the score of which determines how many points of damage can be taken before a character is killed. They can use only a very limited number of magical items of the non-weaponry variety, however, and they can use no spells. Top-level fighters, lords and above, who build castles are considered barons, and as such they may invest in their holdings in order to increase their income. See the investments section of Book 3. Base income for a baron is a tax rate of 10 gold pieces per inhabitant of the barony per game year. Magic users. Top-level magic users are perhaps the most powerful characters in the game, but is a long, hard road to the top, and to begin with, they are weak, so survival is often the question, unless fighters protect the low-level magical types until they've worked up. The whole plethora of enchanted items lies at the magic users' beck and call, save the arms and armor of the fighters. See, however, elves. Magic users may arm themselves with daggers only. Wizards and above may manufacture for their own use, or for sale, such items as potions, scrolls, and just about anything else magical. Costs are commensurate with the value of the item, as is the amount of game time required to enchant it. Examples of costs are: Scroll of Spells is 100 gold pieces per spell level, per week. For example, a 5th level spell would require 500 gold pieces and 5 weeks. A Potion of Healing would cost 250 gold pieces and 1 week. A Potion of Giant Strength would cost 1,000 gold pieces and 4 weeks. Enchanting 20 arrows would cost 1,000 gold pieces and 4 weeks. Enchanting armor to +1 would cost 2,000 gold pieces and 2 months. A wand of cold would cost 10,000 gold pieces and 6 months. And an X-ray vision ring would cost 50,000 gold pieces and a year. Research by magical types can be done at any level of experience, but the level of magic involved dictates the possibility of success, as well as the amount of money necessary to invest. Assume that a magic user can use a 4th level spell, explained later. Therefore, he could develop a new spell provided it was equal to or less than 4th level. All this will be explained fully in a section dealing with spells. Clerics. Clerics gain some of the advantages from both of the other two classes, fighting men and magic users, in that they have the use of magic armor and all non-edged magic weapons, no arrows. Plus, they have numbers of their own spells. In addition, they are able to use more of the magical items than are the fighting men. When clerics reach the top level, Patriarch, they may opt to build their own stronghold, and when doing so, receive help from above. Thus, if they spend 100,000 gold pieces in castle construction, they may build a fortress of double that cost. Finally, faithful men will come to such a castle, being fanatically loyal, and they will serve at no cost. There will be from 10 to 60 heavy cavalry, 10 to 60 horsed crossbowmen, and 30 to 180 heavy foot. Note that clerics of the 7th level and greater are either law or chaos, and there is a sharp distinction between them. If a patriarch receiving the above benefits changes sides, all the benefits will be immediately removed. Clerics with castles of their own will have control of a territory similar to the barony of fighters, and they will receive tithes equal to 20 gold pieces per inhabitant per year. Dwarves. Dwarves may opt only for the fighting class, and they may never progress beyond the 6th level, Myrmidon. Their advantages are, they have a high level of magic resistance, and they thus add 4 levels when rolling saving throws. That is, a 6th level dwarf equals a 10th level human. 2. They're the only characters able to fully employ the +3 magic warhammer explained in Book 3. 3. They note slanting passages, traps, shifting walls, and new construction in underground settings. And 4. They're able to speak the languages of gnomes, kobolds, and goblins in addition to the usual tongues. See languages in this book. Elves. Elves can begin as either fighting men or magic users and freely switch class whenever they choose, from adventure to adventure, but not during the course of a single game. Thus, they gain the benefits of both classes and may use both weaponry and spells. They may use magic armor and still act as magic users. However, they may not progress beyond 4th level fighting man, hero, nor 8th level magic user, warlock. Elves are more able to note secret and hidden doors. They also gain the advantages noted in chainmail rules when fighting certain fantastic creatures. Finally, elves are able to speak the languages of orcs, hobgoblins, and gnolls in addition to their own elvish and the other usual tongues. Halflings. Should any player wish to be one, he will be limited to the fighting men class as a halfling. Halflings cannot progress beyond the 4th level, hero, but they will have magic resistance equal to dwarves, add 4 levels for saving throws, and they will have deadly accuracy with missiles as detailed in chainmail. Other character types. There is no reason that players cannot be allowed to play virtually anything, provided they begin relatively weak and work up to the top. That is, a player wishing to be a dragon would have to begin as, let us say, a young one, and progress upward in the usual manner, steps being predetermined by the campaign referee. So I find it interesting here to note that it says that these top-level fighters are barons, and they get a tax income from their barony. Never heard anybody talk about that before, taxing your inhabitants. That is very interesting. I think it's really interesting how in this cleric section they talk about how all these faithful men come to the castle, how there's all these heavy cavalry, horse crossbowmen, all that stuff that they just show up. I think that's kind of weird. I mean, I guess it makes sense. I think my assumption is that they kind of figured that high-level D&D would just turn into a war game. Once you get to a high enough level, you just start playing chainmail or something. But that is definitely weird in the modern way we kind of play. even in the OSR, I've never heard of just people just showing up to your castle just to like fight for you or something. Kind of weird. But I guess I get it. It's kind of cool, and it's interesting that they don't give these same numbers for the fighting men, you know. But it also is interesting that they say that clerics of 7th level and greater are law or chaos. So I'm assuming that means that you cannot be neutral by 7th level, or that you don't really decide on your class until 7th level. The way I would probably do it is that you can kind of be, you know, filtering back and forth between law, neutral, chaos as you level up, as you go through the campaign. But by the 7th level, you are pretty solidified in whatever your alignment was. That's how I see it, at least. I think it's interesting how they talk about these demi-humans, because it seems like they're not talking about them as race as class, as we've heard in, you know, BX or whatever. But it seems like you can be a dwarf, but you as a dwarf are necessarily a fighting man. You just can't go past 6th level, and you get these other bonuses. So the main downside is a level cap, and you get these extra bonuses for that. Same thing with elves; they can switch between fighting man or magic users. It's not like elf is the class. It's like elf is the ability to change between two classes at will. It does say whenever you choose from adventure to adventure. I think from reading Moldvay, it seems like the term adventure is used similar to how we would say session these days. So one adventure is just one session of D&D. That's how I am reading that. And I think that each quote-unquote adventure back in those days was more of a standalone one-shot kind of thing that was wrapped up in its entirety by the end of the session. So you'd go off to go save the princess, and she'd be saved by the end of the session, or at least you would have accomplished some progress towards that, which would be enough to be considered an adventure, like in itself. I don't know, weird, but it says you cannot switch class during the course of a single game. So I think the term game is being used the same way that adventure is being used to talk about a session. So you can change your class between sessions, but not during it. I think that's a little bit interesting. So you kind of have to plan in advance. Am I going to be a fighting man or a magic user this time? A little bit weird. I'm not sure how the leveling up would exactly work with this, but kind of interesting. So you can only become a 4th level fighting man or an 8th level magic user. And I know that leads to some spell limitations and whatnot, which is a big downside for elves. I like how they say for halflings here, should any player choose to be one, he'll be limited to the fighting man. So it seems like, they can't progress beyond the 4th level. That is a serious downside. 4th level is not that high. That's, that's a pretty serious level cap. But they get some serious accuracy with missile weapons. That's pretty cool. Character alignment, including various monsters and creatures. Before the game begins, it is not only necessary to select a role, but it is also necessary to determine what stance the character will take: law, neutrality, or chaos. Character types are limited as follows by this alignment. And then they provide a pretty big chart of all the different alignments and which creatures can take which one. As you can see, notably, men can take any alignment, or as they call it in this book, stance, or division. And elves can be lawful or neutral. Rocks can be lawful or neutral. Dwarves and gnomes and centaurs can be lawful or neutral. Lycanthropes can be any of the three. Giants, orcs, ogres, minotaurs, dragons, and chimeras can be chaotic or neutral. Changing character class. While changing class, for other than elves, is not recommended, the following rule should be applied. In order for men to change a class, they must have a score of 16 or better in the prime requisite, see below, of the class they wish to change to. And this score must be unmodified. A cleric with a strength of 15, for example, could not become a fighting man. In any event, magic users cannot become clerics and vice versa. Determination of abilities. Prior to the character selection by players, it is necessary for the referee to roll 3 six-sided dice in order to rate each as to various abilities, and thus aid them in selecting a role. Categories of ability are Strength, Intelligence, Wisdom, Constitution, Dexterity, and Charisma. Each player notes his appropriate scores, obtains a similar roll of 3 dice to determine the number of gold pieces, dice score times 10, he starts with, and then opts for a roll. A sample of the record of a character appears like this. Name, Xylarthan. Class, Magic User. Strength 6, Intelligence 11, Wisdom 13, Constitution 12, Dexterity 9, Charisma 8. Gold pieces 70, Experience nil. This supposed player would have progressed faster as a cleric, but because of a personal preference for magic, opted for that class. With a strength of only 6, there was no real chance for him to become a fighter. His constitutional score indicates good health and the ability to take punishment of most forms. A dexterity of 9, low average, means that he will not be particularly fast nor accurate. He's below average in charisma, but not hopelessly so. Explanation of abilities. The first 3 categories are the prime requisites for each of the 3 classes: fighting men, magic users, and clerics. See the bonuses and penalties to advancement due to abilities table, which appears hereafter. Strength is the prime requisite for fighters. Clerics can use strength on a 3-for-1 basis in their prime requisite area, wisdom, for purposes of gaining experience only. Strength will also aid in opening traps, and so on. Intelligence is the prime requisite for magical types. Both fighters and clerics can use it in their prime requisite areas, strength and wisdom respectively, on a 2-for-1 basis. Intelligence will also affect referees' decisions as to whether or not a certain action would be taken, and it allows additional languages to be spoken. Wisdom is the prime requisite for clerics. It may be used on a 3-for-1 basis by fighters and on a 2-for-1 basis by magic users in their respective prime requisite areas. Wisdom rating will act much as does that for intelligence. Constitution is a combination of health and endurance. It will influence such things as the number of hits which can be taken and how well the character can withstand being paralyzed, turned to stone, etc. So it's notable here that according to these rules, it's the referee who rolls the 3d6 to determine the ability scores of the character. And it just says that they obtain a similar roll of 3 dice to determine gold pieces. So it doesn't say who's going to roll for gold pieces. Of course, these days, usually we have the player roll for the stats and gold pieces, but this is a different time, I guess. Dexterity applies to both manual speed and conjuration. It will indicate the character's missile ability and speed with actions such as firing first, getting off a spell, etc. Charisma is a combination of appearance, personality, and so forth. Its primary function is to determine how many hirelings of unusual nature a character can attract. This is not to say that he cannot hire men-at-arms and employ mercenaries, but the charisma function will affect loyalty of even those men. Players will, in all probability, seek to hire fighting men, magic users, and/or clerics in order to strengthen their roles in the campaign. A player character can employ only as many as indicated by his charisma score. And then it provides a chart here of how many hirelings and their loyalty based off the charisma score. In addition, the charisma score is usable to decide such things as whether or not a witch capturing a player will turn him into a swine or keep him enchanted as a lover. Finally, charisma will aid a character in attracting various monsters to his service. So, here it seems interesting that it notes that charisma is used to determine how many hirelings of unusual nature a character can attract. So, it's not clear what they mean by unusual nature, and whether that includes, these regular fighting men, magic users, and clerics, or if that's just, what is a usual hireling? Is that just like porters and torchbearers and stuff like that, or hirelings of unusual nature? Is that these fighting men, magic users, and clerics. It's interesting. Also, I like how it says here that it determines whether a witch will turn them into a swine or keep them enchanted as a lover. That's interesting. And then this last thing here, finally, charisma will aid a character in attracting various monsters to his service. I've never seen that in any of the rule sets since, but I'm not particularly well versed, so I've never seen anyone talk about attracting monsters to their service. That's definitely interesting. So, bonuses and penalties to advancement due to abilities. A low score is 3 to 8, average is 9 to 12, and high is 13 to 18. And then it provides a bunch of numbers here about what those things do. So basically, a high prime requisite gives you experience bonus, and a low prime requisite gives you a reduction. But Constitution is a little bit more interesting. So Constitution of 15 or more, you'll add 1 to each hit die. Constitution of 13 or 14 allows you to withstand adversity, whatever that means. Constitution of 9 to 12 gives you a 60 to 90% chance of survival. To what, I'm not sure. Constitution of 8 or 7 gives a 40 to 50% chance of survival. 6 or less is -1 from each hit die. And then Dexterity above 12, you can fire any missile at +1, or under 9, and you get a -1. Note, average scores are 9 to 12. Units so indicated above may be used to increase prime requisite total insofar as this does not bring that category of below average, that is, a score of below 9. Languages. The common tongue spoken throughout the continent is known by most humans. All other creatures and monsters which can speak have their own language, although some, 20%, also know the common one. Law, chaos, and neutrality also have common languages spoken by each respectively. One can attempt to communicate through the common tongue, language particular to a creature class, or one of those divisional languages, law, etc. While not understanding the language, creatures who speak a divisional tongue will recognize a hostile one and attack. Creatures with intelligence above 10 may learn additional languages, one language for every point above 10 intelligence factors. Thus, a man with an intelligence of 15 could speak 17 languages, that is, the common tongue, his divisional languages, and 5 creature languages. Of course, magic user spells and some magic items will enable the speaking and understanding of languages. So I think it's interesting here, the way they talk about languages. You got to roll percentile dice to see if creatures and monsters know common. Kind of weird. They also talk about the, famous divisive alignment languages here, law, chaos, and neutrality. Doesn't explain how they work exactly, but it does say that they call them divisional languages here. I guess another word for alignment would be division. While not understanding the language, creatures who speak a divisional tongue will recognize a hostile one and attack. So it also doesn't let us know, where does neutral fit in here? Is neutral hostile to law or chaos? Doesn't say, but I guess we're led to assume on our own. We're led to assume that law and chaos are hostile, but it doesn't say. Non-player characters. In all probability, the referee will find it beneficial to allow participants in the campaign to hire into service one or more characters. At times, this may be nothing more than a band of mercenaries hired to participate in and share the profits from some adventure. However, it is likely that players will be desirous of acquiring a regular entourage of various character types, monsters, and an army of some form. Non-player characters can be hired as follows. Only the lowest level of character types can be hired. The player wishing to hire a non-player character advertises by posting notices at inns and taverns, frequents public places seeking the desired hireling, or sends messengers to whatever place the desired character type would be found. Elf land, dwarf land, etc. This costs money and takes time. The referee must determine expenditures. Once some response has been obtained, the player must make an offer to tempt the desired character type into his service. As a rule of thumb, a minimum offer of 100 gold pieces will be required to tempt a human into service. Dwarves are more interested in gold. Magic users and elves desire magical items, and clerics want some assurance of having a place of worship in which to house themselves. Monsters can be lured into service if they are of the same basic alignment as the player character, or they can be charmed and thus ordered to serve. Note, however, that the term monster includes men found in the dungeon, so in this way, some high-level characters can be brought into a character's service, charisma allowing or through a charm spell. Some reward must be offered to a monster in order to induce it into service, not just sparing its life, for example. The monster will react with appropriate pluses or minuses according to the offer, the referee rolling 2 six-sided dice and adjusting for charisma. A dice score of 2 means the monster will attempt to attack. A 3 to 5 will get a hostile reaction. 6 to 8 will be uncertain. 9 to 11 will accept the offer. And 12 will be an enthusiast with a loyalty of +3. An uncertain reaction leaves the door open for additional reward offers, but scores under 6 do not. So this is pretty interesting here. I think it's cool how they talk about the process of hiring or advertising some specific hireling. So it seems like the idea would be you get some mercenaries just, by being cool and finding a, band of mercenaries you can hire or something like that. But if you want to get some of these, like characters that are similar power to the the PCs, you need to make an advertisement. So you get these nameless, swordsmen. But if you want to get a fighting man or a hero of some sort, you need to make an advertisement, pay 100 gold pieces at least, and wait some amount of time to see if you can get back from that. And I like how they talk about going to elf land or dwarf land or whatever. That's pretty cool. Interesting way. I gotta try implementing that in my own game. Capture of non-player monsters. Morale dice can cause a man or intelligent monster to attempt to surrender or become subdued. When this happens, an offer of service can be made, assuming that communication is possible, as outlined above. Subdued monsters will obey for a time without need to check the reactions, and such monsters are salable. See Book 2. Loyalty of non-player characters, including monsters. Men, dwarves, and elves will serve as retainers with relative loyalty so long as they receive their pay regularly, are treated fairly, are not continually exposed to extra hazardous duty, and receive bonuses when they are taking part in some dangerous venture. Judgment of this matter is perforce subjective on the part of the campaign referee, but there is a simple guideline. When one or more of such characters are taken into service, a loyalty check is made by rolling 3 six-sided dice. Adjustments are made for charisma and initial payments for service, and the loyalty of the characters noted by the referee. The player will not have any knowledge of what it is without some method of reading minds. Loyalty score of 3 or less means they will desert at the first opportunity. Loyalty score of 4 to 6, you will get a -2. We'll get a -2 on morale dice. 7 to 8 will get a -1. 9 to 12 will be average morale dice. 13 to 14 gets a +1. 15 to 18 gets a +2. And 19 and above, you never need to check morale. So this is definitely different from what I'm familiar with Moldvay, where morale rolls and loyalty rolls are on 2d6, but this is on a 3d6. So it seems like you roll 3d6 when you hire some guy, and whatever you get is their loyalty. This morale dice thing, I'm not understanding. -2 on morale dice. I guess, let's see. Non-player characters and men-at-arms will have to make morale checks using the above reaction table or chainmail whenever a highly dangerous or unnerving situation arises. Poor morale means that those in question will not perform as expected. Periodic rechecks of loyalty should be made. Length of service, rewards, etc. will bring additional pluses. Poor treatment will bring minuses. Relatives. The referee may allow players to designate one relative of his character to inherit his possessions if for any reason the participant unexpectedly disappears, with or without death being positively established, for a period of 1 game month, let us say. At this time, the relative would inherit the estate of the character, paying a 10% tax on all goods and monies. The relative must start at the lowest level of the class he opts for, but he will have the advantage of the inheritance. If the character returns, he takes possession of his estate once more, referee's option as to willingness of the relative to give it up, but must pay an additional 10% tax in order to regain his own. Optionally, the relative may be allowed to stay on as a non-player character in the service of a player character. Loyalty of the relative in such a circumstance will be at a penalty of from 0 to -6, and he would possibly intrigue to regain control. Characters without a relative will lose all their possessions should they disappear and not return before whatever period is designated as establishing death. So it seems like this is a pretty interesting inheritance rule talking about here. So let's say you have a character that goes missing for a month. Their son or whatever is going to get their castle, but they have to pay a 10% tax. So that son would presumably be the next character that player chooses to play as. They start at level 1, but they got all this money, they got a castle, whatever. But let's pretend that original character mysteriously returns. They can, they get their castle back. They have to pay a 10% tax, to get it. And then that son or that relative is going to, could stay in service, but they'll have a decreased loyalty. So interesting. Could be some Game of Thrones stuff going on there. Basic equipment and costs. It will be necessary for players to equip their characters with various basic items of equipment. Selections of items is strictly up to the players, and gold pieces are taken away accordingly. Players may sell to one another, of course, and then gold pieces will be transferred. And it's got this huge list here of equipment and their costs. Does not give a lot of stats here, though, for their uses, but there are some interesting items on here that, call on some questions. So, for example, a mace is 5 gold, but so is 1 bud of garlic, which is 5 times more than a quart of wine. So 1 bud of garlic is equal to, 1 week's worth of standard rations. That's crazy. That's a famous one, that garlic costs so much. You can buy a bunch of wolfsbane or belladonna. They got all these different weapons here: battle axes, morning stars, flails, but they don't explain how they're different. Are they just different because of flavor? Are they different because of mechanics? Or is it up to the DM? Interesting stuff. But they include also here some animals. So we got mules, draft horses, carts, wagons, boats, galleys. So to make a large galley, it's 30 grand. So I'm not sure what quarrels are, but I'm assuming that's some sort of, maybe that's must be crossbow ammunition, I'm assuming. And then here we see the weights of various items. So weight which can be carried. So I guess for encumbrance purposes, we have the list, like this list of different things by their weight. So a man weighs 1,750 gold or coins, so I'm assuming that's 175 pounds. And here it's saying the load in gold pieces equal to light foot movement, heavy foot movement, and arm foot movement. So if you have in this range here of stuff you're carrying, you move that much. So we've got a bunch of different things here: helmets, shields, etc., miscellaneous equipment, maximum load. So it seems like they're not really going to ask you to, they're not having you count the weight of each arrow, for instance. It's just saying, okay, whatever. You have a sword, it's 50. You have a bow and arrow, like a quiver full of arrows, whatever. Doesn't matter how many arrows you have, it's still 50. Dagger, 20. Morning star, flail, whatever, all this is 100. And it's a little bit less meticulous than I expected, but it's interesting. And then they total it all up here, and it says they have 1,200 total coins worth that they're carrying, which goes into the heavy foot movement range. Oh, sorry, actually, that goes into the armed foot movement range because let's see. Actually, how do they say this? Yes, they say it is the armed foot movement range. The character would move at the speed of an armored footman, 6 inches per turn. He could pick up an additional 300 gold pieces weight of treasure and incur no movement penalty. Weight over 1,500 would incur the penalty of half speed, noted above, although equipment could be discarded in order to avoid this penalty. And then we see here the weight and equivalence here. So a coin is 1, a gem is 1, and it says a sack, a bag, whatever, weighs all this much stuff. And then here we see the amount of XP required to level up for these different groups. And it also has the names of these levels. So we see fighting men, they level up just in the middle between clerics, which level the fastest, and magic users, which level the slowest. So I know in Moldvay, they have race as class, and it's a little bit different because elves have a whole different leveling up rate. Same with dwarves. But it seems here that you just level up as if you are a fighting man or a magic user or a cleric. Maybe, so let's say if you're an elf and you have, let's say 4,000 XP. You choose to be a fighting man one session. I think that means you're a swordsman. But if you choose the same, if you would have chosen to be a magic user that session, you would have only been a seer because you have 6,000, or because you have 4,000 XP at this time you chose. So I think, you don't put XP towards one class or the other, just kind of goes into a pool. That would be my guess. I also think it's interesting how they name these levels here. Like for instance, the magic user, you eventually become a necromancer. No matter what kind of way you've been playing the magic user, you always become a necromancer. Interesting. So there's some statistics for these classes. So it explains what, how much hit dice you have per level, and what spells you get. So interesting stuff, not crazy out of the ordinary. Fighting capability here. This is a bit weird. This is a very weird way of writing this. Man +1, 2 men +1. That's weird. That's really weird. But I guess they're saying a warrior is as strong as 2 men and they have a +1. I don't know. And they continue it over here with the clerics. Their hit dice, their fighting ability, and their spells. Alright, so here they're going to explain the experience points. Experience points are awarded to players by the referee with appropriate bonuses or penalties for prime requisite scores. As characters meet monsters in mortal combat and defeat them, and when they obtain various forms of treasure, money, gems, jewelry, magic items, etc., they gain experience. This adds to their experience point total, gradually moving them upward through the levels. Gains in experience points will be relative, thus an 8th level magic user operating on the 5th dungeon level would be awarded 5/8 experience. Let us assume he gains 7,000 gold pieces by defeating a troll, which is a 7th level monster, as it has over 6 hit dice. Had the monster been only a 5th level one, experience would be awarded on a 5/8 basis, as already stated, but as the monster guarding the treasure was a 7th level one, experience would be rewarded on a 7/8 basis. Thus, 7,000 gold points plus 700 for killing the troll equals 7,700 divided by 8 equals 962.5 times 7 equals 6,037.5. Experience points are never awarded above a 1-for-1 basis, so even if a character defeats a high-level monster, he will not receive experience points above the total of treasure combined with the monster's kill value. It is also recommended that no more experience points be awarded for any single adventure than will suffice to move the character upwards 1 level. Thus, a veteran, 1st level, gains what would ordinarily be 5,000 experience points. However, as this would move him upwards 2 levels, the referee should award him only sufficient points to bring him to warrior 2nd level, say 3,999 if the character began with 0 experience points. Okay, really quick, this is really weird. I have never heard about this relative experience points thing, where you get fractions of experience points, or you get a deduction for operating on a lesser level of the dungeon. That's interesting. Totally never heard about that. Also, I do not generally play with giving XP for killing monsters because I always forget to record how many hit dice they killed. Levels. There is no theoretical limit to how high a character may progress. That is, 20th level Lord, 20th level Wizard, etc. Distinct names have only been included for the base levels, but this does not influence progression. Interesting. So they don't give how much XP would be required to continue leveling up past these levels here, but I guess they just let you continue. They say, you keep playing however long you want. Dice for cumulative hits, hit dice. This indicates the number of dice which are rolled in order to determine how many hit points a character can take. Pluses are merely the number of pips added to the total of all dice rolled, not to each die. Thus, a superhero gets 8 dice plus 2. They are rolled and score 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, totaling 26 plus 2 equals 28. 28 being the number of points of damage the character could sustain before death. Whether sustaining accumulative hits will otherwise affect a character is left to the discretion of the referee. So it seems like they're leaving open the possibility of, if you take 14 damage, for instance, maybe you'll lose an arm or something. Fighting capability. This is a key to use in conjunction with the chainmail fantasy rule as modified in various places herein. An alternative system will be given later for those who prefer a different method. Okay, that is interesting. It makes sense. So it's referencing chainmail rules with this man plus one, 3 men plus 1 stuff. Spells and levels. The number above each column is the spell level. Complexity, a somewhat subjective determination on the part of your authors. The number in each column opposite each applicable character indicates the number of spells of each level that can be used, remembered during any single adventure by that character. Spells are listed and explained later. A spell used once may not be reused in the same day. Okay, so that lays out some interesting things. So you only can remember a certain number of spells. I think later editions, even in like BX, the way they talk about this is very different, with like having a chalkboard in your mind where you write down the spell and erase it after you cast it or something like that. But you can see kind of the beginnings of what they're talking about with these spell levels and spell slots and whatever. But anyway, levels above those listed. Progressions of dice for cumulative hits, fighting capability, and spells and levels may not be evident. An 11th level Lord would get 10 plus 3 dice and fight as he did at the 10th level, but at 12th level he could get 11 plus 1 dice and fight at superhero plus 2. At 13th level, dice would be 11 plus 3 with fighting capability at superhero plus 2. A 17th level wizard would get 9 plus 3 dice and fight as at 16th level, just as an 18th level wizard would get dice of 10 plus 1 with no change in fighting capabilities. The change coming at the 19th level, fighting then being done at wizard plus 3. An 11th level patriarch would get the dice of 7 plus 3 with fighting capability unchanged. At 12th level, dice would be 8 plus 1 with no change in fighting, and at 13th level, the patriarch would get an 8 plus 2 and fight as a superhero. The next change in fighting capability coming at the 17th level. So they basically just said their leveling up system is weird and not entirely obvious at first glance. I guess they have their reasons for these things. I kind of just ditch some of the complexity. Personally, I make it pretty obvious how leveling up works in my own games. Spell progression for magic users is 17th level wizard gets 6, 6, 6, 5, 5. I guess those are spell slots. 18th level wizard sizes across the board, and so on. Spell progression for clerics is 11th level patriarch 4, 4, 4, 3, 3. 12th level patriarch 4s across the board. 13th level Patriarch, 5/5/5, 4/4, and so on. Alternative combat system. This system is based upon the defensive and offensive capabilities of the combatants. Such things as speed, ferocity, and weaponry of the monster attacking are subsumed in the matrices. There are 2 charts, one for men versus men or monsters, and one for monsters, including kobolds, goblins, orcs, etc., versus men. So here they have these attack matrices, and talk about armor class, and how you get your armor class and how you hit with the different things. So it seems like we've got descending armor class. So a 2 is plate armor with a shield, having an armor class of 2, that is. And in order to hit, if you're a first level guy, you got to roll a 17 on a d20. But if you're level 16 or above, you only got to hit a 5. So here we see, monsters attacking. Okay, so this is the men attacking attack matrix. So if you are attacking a monster, you roll on this. If you're the GM and you're a monster attacking a PC, you roll on this one. And then this is a saving throw matrix. So this is a really weird way to lay this out. That is okay. So the different saving throws are death ray or poison, all wands including polymorph or paralyzation, stone, dragon breath, staves, and spells. So you need to hit or exceed these numbers in order to save. It's interesting how they word these saving throws. Death ray or poison, all wands including polymorph or paralyzation, stone, dragon breath, staves, and spells. So I imagine if you're the GM calling for a saving throw, you wouldn't say, could you roll an all wands including polymorph or paralyzation save? I think, it makes sense. You just say, can you make a wand save for me? Or could you make a spell save? Stone, some of these are not entirely obvious what they are. A stone save, what does that even mean? Can you make a stone save for me? Kind of not obvious. But let's see. Failure to make the total indicated above results in the weapon. Failure to make the total indicated above results in the weapon having full effect. That is, your turn to stone, take full damage from dragon's breath, etc. Scoring the total indicated above or scoring higher means the weapon has no effect. Death ray, polymorph, paralyzation, stone, or spell, or 1/2 effect. Poison scoring 1/2 the total possible hit damage, and dragon's breath scoring 1/2 its full damage. Wands of cold, fireballs, lightning, etc., and stabs are treated as indicated, but saving throws being made result in half damage. Okay, now we got a bunch of spells. We got the spells table here. So it seems like there's 8 first level magic user spells, 10 second level, and 14 third level spells. And then we go all the way up to 6th level, which is the maximum level of spells. Now, I think, let's see. So this is something that is interesting. If we compare this with the charts we saw before, so elves are only able to get to 8th level magic user. And 8th level magic users are warlocks, which means they only have 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th level spells. So meaning an elf can never get 5th or 6th level spells. Never. That is a big limitation for those guys. It means they'll never have access to teleport or feeble mind or disintegrate, any of these crazy spells. Reincarnation, stone to flesh, death spell. They don't get access to those, never. So that is the big limiting factor of elves, I think. Clerics here, we've got, they go to 5th level spells, and these underlined ones, I'm assuming I don't see it here, but I'm assuming these are ones that are reversed by being a chaotic cleric rather than a lawful one. So let's see. So clerics versus undead monsters. So we have here the what we now call the turn undead table, and it seems like basically if you are a first level cleric, you'd be an acolyte, and then you'd roll 2d6. Numbers are the score to match or exceed in order to turn away, rolling with 2 6-sided dice. So if you are an acolyte and you find some skeletons, you got to roll 2d6. If it's a 7 or higher, you have officially turned the skeletons, and you roll 2d6 to see how many skeletons you turn. Dispelled or dissolved, I think, is, we would now say, destroyed. And then no effect means you just cannot turn it. So an acolyte cannot turn a white or stronger. I've seen these charts now, and they usually are simplified where they say literally the level number at the top and the number of hit dice on the left. But I kind of like it like this, where it tells you what kind of creature it is. And I do like these level names a little bit better than the level numbers. I think it just kind of adds more flavor. And then we have explanation of spells, which lasts pretty much the remainder of the book, which I will get into another time. I will have to note that this illustration of an elf is totally not what we normally think of as an elf these days. I like that a lot. So, magical research. Both magic users and clerics may attempt to expand on the spells listed as applicable by class. This is a matter of time and investment. The level of the magic required to operate the spell, determination by referee, dictates the initial investment. Investment for first level is 2,000 gold pieces, second level is 4,000 gold pieces, third level is 8,000 gold pieces, fourth level is 16,000 gold pieces, fifth is 32,000, and sixth is 64,000. The time required is 1 week per spell level. For every amount equal to the basic investment spent, there is a 20% chance of success, cumulative. An investment of 10,000 gold pieces in order to develop a new first level spell, for example, has a 100% chance of success after 1 game week. The level of the spell researched must be consistent with the level of the magic user or cleric involved. That is, the character must be able to use spells equal to or above the level of one he chooses to create. Once a new spell is created, the researcher may include it in the list appropriate to its level. He may inform others of it, thus enabling them to utilize it, or he may keep it to himself. Books of spells. Characters who employ spells are assumed to acquire books containing the spells they can use, 1 book for each level. If a duplicate set of such books is desired, the cost will be the same as the initial investment for research as listed above. That is 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, etc. Loss of these books will require replacement at the above expense. So this is very interesting. It does not tell us exactly how these books are used. Are they casting from the book? Like, are they reading the spell out loud from the book? Or are they memorizing it and then saying it? You know, interesting stuff. Do you need to carry these books in your inventory when you're on adventure, or do you just memorize it in town, leave the book back at home, and then go to the dungeon with the spell in your mind? It doesn't tell us, so that is very interesting. But anyway, this brings us to the end of book 1, and all we have left to talk about is the spells in this book, and we have the other 2 books. So I hope you enjoyed listening along to book 1 of the OD&D rules. I think it's very interesting kind of going through this and seeing how it was originally imagined and kind of thinking about things.